it's sort of a good occasion to give an update about the community happenings. Particularly we'll focus on the board meeting that was 2 weeks ago and what was decided at that point. So this was the agenda as it was sent out, and I added a few quick points here as well. First, Scilifelab research community programs, expensive instruments. This will be a very short update, but then we'll discuss a bit on the future strategy for Scilifelab. So first of all, this has been a spring of all sorts of applications that people have been asked to file at Scilifelab. First we had the research community programs. Then all the facilities have filed midterm checkup. There has been an opportunity to file for funding for the incorporation or extension of pilot facilities that were started up earlier with SFO funding. Then there was a call for expensive instruments and a technology development support. So altogether this resulted in about 360 million crowns, which is more than our total Scilifelab annual budget. But nevertheless, it's a good turnout in the sense that people are interested to develop Scilifelab forward. And we are obviously trying to do our best in finding the money to fund it, but that will be a little bit difficult because if you count all the infrastructure support that we have regularly available for Scilifelab out, we are left about 20 million per year, which would be about 40 million per 2 years. We have some surplus from the past years, and we hope that for many of these programs we could also get SFO support. So I don't know the exact amount, but at least 50 million for the 2 years, maybe more. But nevertheless, it's only 1/6 or 1/7 of the total applied. So this will be a very competitive situation to get funding for these calls. And traditionally we have had two funding sources, and obviously that's what we still have. The host universities get SFO support from the government, independently decide on that SFO support, and then Scilifelab has national funding directly from the government. And this has been used for the national infrastructure funding, and this has been used for the research funding. So we hope that these programs that we now are launching here would be jointly funded. And they would be somewhere between an SFO funding and a national funding. Maybe the research communities are more researchy in nature, whereas the instruments are very clearly linked to the national infrastructure funding in that sense. So these two have so far been decided, so I will now go through an update about what was the process and how these ended up being applied. So first of all, the RCPs, so sorry for the abbreviations, Research Community Programs, RCPs. So this is the first time that a formal process has been done to try to scientifically profile Scilifelab activities on a research side at the national level. And this is actually also a first time that an integrated funding approach has been applied, meaning that we have both the national and the SFO contributing to these programs. So 34 applications were received. Management group looked at them. International Advisory Board gave comments on this, and then the Scilifelab committees of all the host universities looked at them. So this was very thoroughly evaluated in that sense. This was a complex process, and we had very many good proposals from the community. So this was really nice to have 34 of them. Unfortunately, again, we cannot fund too many of them. There were many opinions raised during the evaluation procedure. Finally, all the host universities decided to come together and support all the RCPs. Initially, we thought that some universities would primarily support some, but now all of the host universities support all of the RCPs. And we had the May 22 board decision that I will tell you in a second, and we have now communicated the outcome to the applicants as well. This is now the list of the approved RCPs. We have not now listed any PI names here because this is first and foremost a community, and we say which university coordinates this, but in all cases many, if not all, host universities participate, and in many cases most of Swedish universities participate in this thing as well. So we need to make a better description with the representation of the different universities. But biology or molecular interactions coordinated by Stockholm University, human developmental cell atlas by KTH, disease relevant models from Karolinska Institute, tumor microenvironment program from Lund University coordination, human protein atlas associated research from KTH, genomic medicine Sweden from Karolinska, and the only non-biomedical format is the aquatic microbiome research community. So I'll have a few pointers now on this process in a way. So what meant or how did we come up with these proposals? So first of all, because we had so many parties evaluating, typically the ones that were attracting interest from multiple parties, if not all parties, got most positive comments. It had to have cutting edge research associated on a global perspective, multi-university nationwide coverage, and that we felt that this is important also for Scilifelab profiling purposes, and that this is based, or at least makes use of Scilifelab facilities in a major way. So what happens now? This was like phase one of these things. We asked the RCPs now to take into account all the comments. We would like them to refine the name so that it can be used broadly at Scilifelab to list what are the Scilifelab research programs, indicate how the funding facilitates community building, and they should remain open and inclusive. So this is not a grant application where a PI and a fixed number of people participate. This is meant to be a community, continuous community building, and therefore they should be open to the incorporation of new scientists and new universities that were not there at the time of the application. And a refined version should be then approved in the board meeting. We were also planning that we would have a kickoff symposium that would be joint for all of these RCP applications. When that will happen remains to be seen, and that the International Advisory Board will look at these proposals as well in the fall. So we obviously learned quite a bit in this process, and the whole point of running this call was that we would see how this type of an approach of supporting science works at Scilifelab. So for the future, we hope to refine the purpose and expectations of what an RCP is better. We think that this should not fund any existing research, but more like how that should be expanded or networked or reached out. And a common criticism or a comment, what can you do with 1 million crowns per year? Well, this is not meant for research support. This is meant for community building and extending a community. So it's much more than a funding, and it's sort of a linking the community together and linking the community together with infrastructure. So this is much more and different than research funding. And it's important for Scilifelab, for the profiling of what happens, what does Scilifelab do, for branding, and for the infrastructure to tell that we are associated with these types of research efforts. It's much easier to describe to politicians, to casual visitors, or whoever comes around of what is infrastructure doing if you can explain it based on research. criticism that there was too little time to apply and the decision process was complicated, so we will have to do this better next time. It's also difficult to engage a national community in something that you don't really know what it is. So next time around we probably can do that a lot better. Fairly few applications came from non-biomedical topics and very few from the clinical medicine community. So that's the types of things that we should do, as well as encourage applications from other than the host universities. So Lund was now coordinating one of the approved ones. So the plan is now that this was phase 1, this was stage 1, but we will probably run another call later on. So if you missed the boat, 2 things what you can do is to try to join an existing RCP if they are relevant to you, or then wait for 18 months and there may be another round of applications at that point. Then another thing that was funded now was the expensive instruments, and this is what Annika presented for the board, but now to get the microphones set up running smoothly, I'll just do it quickly. So the plan was that we will fund from Scilifelab national budget instruments for the national facilities that would cost 3 million crowns or more, and we had about 20 applications requesting together 74 million. Well, we don't quite have that much funding available, but we did grant funding to these applications to a total of over 30 million. So this was almost 50% funded, because we really felt that this is an important part of Scilife activities, that we support the instrumentation base for the facilities that are running here, but obviously not every facility, not every platform could get funding here. So why did some succeed, some not? What are the criteria that were applied here? Was that first of all we looked at the facility would be doing well, developing well, having a lot of activity, and maybe an even bigger user base that they could. So instruments should be useful to expand the user base, expand the national impact, and the instruments should be critical for acquiring new users. But it shouldn't be technology development, it should not be internal research, it should really be important to the community of users at large. So that's the equipment part. These have now all been decided and delegated and contributed to the community. This program, Technology Development Projects, TDPs, is undergoing review. We are actually meeting with the management group today to have the first discussion on them, but this will take a long time to sort it out. So here we had 52 applications, and I would say that this is the most competitive of all calls out here, and there are very many excellent proposals. I think this is really reflecting the strength of the Scilifelab community, and I would really love that if we had 150 million available to fund them. Most of them probably would be very well fundable. Unfortunately, we don't have enough money to support all of them, but let's see how the outcome will be and how much SFO funding could perhaps be contributed to successful programs as well. Then finally, a couple of quick other points on what the board, or what I described to the board as to what has happened. A few things on the research and conferences side. There was recently the Keystone Symposium on Precision Medicine and Cancer, which I think was highly successful, 279 participants. We also highlighted the Scilifelab as a sort of a contributor to the conference. Then there was the Scilifelab Annual Science Summit on chemical and genetic screening. And as with all these symposia, there's often a poll that has been collected. So most participants were highly satisfied, rating 4 or 5 to the participation in the meeting. Obviously, those people are likely to go who are interested. So this is inherently a little bit biased, but 300 people from the community is nevertheless a very good good number. So thanks to all of those who organized this one. And also another example of recent activities was a joint first meeting between Scilifelab fellows and the WCMM, the Wallenberg Centers of Molecular Medicine. So altogether there were almost 100 young group leaders in Sweden who met for the first time together, and they had networking activities and career development activities, but also hopefully there will be joint research efforts arising from this, and they were also presented, those of the WCMM fellows were presented with an overview of Scilifelab infrastructures as well. So then one major piece of funding news we have in December, we had the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Scientific Advisory Board visiting at Scilifelab, and they were so impressed with what they saw here and also saw that there's a lot of need for certain types of research still to develop. So they made very recently two major funding decisions. One is to upgrade in a significant way the cryo-EM facility in Stockholm, with Gunnar von Heine applying and getting 70 million crowns to have a new cryo-EM setup and a new detector to the existing one. So this will quadruple, 4 times increase the capacity of the cryo-EM starting next year when everything is installed. And then Sten Linnarsson, along with a group of other scientists at Scilifelab, filed an application for the Human Developmental Cell Atlas project and a spatial omics infrastructure, where Joachim Lundberg, Emma Lundberg and Mats Nilsson were also participating. And this will be single cells and then looking for the gene and protein expression patterns at the single cell level in the intact tissues as well, but a major funding initiative in that sense. A few other points that I'm not going to touch upon today, but just to list for the sake of completeness and transparency as to what the board was presented with. The Campus Solna committee has made localization principles on how the Campus Solna should be acting and what principles should be applied in prioritizing space at Campus Solna, and this was endorsed by the board. This isn't really something that the board decides. This is also very much something that is important to the host facilities, host universities. Scilifelab Fellows Program principles were similarly approved. This is again a topic that is run by the host universities, and there was an attempt to at least set up minimal criteria on uniformity of the Scilifelab Fellows Program. The Operations Office has recently sort of changed or is undergoing an update, and I will let Fredrik to describe that at some point in the future, maybe not today. And then we discussed on the International Advisory Board meeting that is coming up in March, and that actually links to this slide. So March 11th to 13th next year, this group of people will come to evaluate or advise Scilifelab going forward. Now the chair of the board is Jan Ellenberg, because the Bertil Andersson stepped down as a board chair person. So Jan will chair the group, and we are starting already this summer to prepare on how the next IAB visit should take place. Similarly, we now have a nominated National Scilifelab Committee from the non-host universities. And these are the people who are part of this committee, and they are meant to advise us to make sure that Scilifelab is having a national impact. And they will come here for their first meeting in September this year. And in the future, we hope they will also help us to guide on the funding decisions that we have just recently decided on. And then finally, unlike usually when board just decides on a quarterly manner what are the active items going and what should be decided, now we had a strategy meeting with the board with an intent to look for the next 2 years and for the next 4 years after that one, into the future as to what is there for Scilifelab. And obviously strategy discussions are typically about discussing. They are not really to decide on a strategy yet. So I'm not presenting anything that is a decision now, just sort of a certain issues that were sort of discussed with the board. One is the National Scilifelab's National Life Science Strategy. So the government has recently released a document where they indicate as to what the government sees as life science priorities. This is unfortunately or strangely, I would say, totally medical strategy. This is not life science strategy in that sense. So we should sort of just interpret it as such. Sorry that this is in Swedish only, but I just directly copied it from the government document. But this is interesting for Scilifelab in a number of different ways. So first of all, it says clearly that the main recommendations for continued work involve national infrastructure for genetic medicine and introduction of new technologies in healthcare. So this is obviously very much in the interest of Scilifelab. Interesting thing is also to say that there should be Sweden as a whole should act like a test bed for rapid introduction of new drugs with half the development time and half the development cost and quicker access to patients. So that's obviously a lot to say. I mean, nobody has just been able to achieve that, but that's what they say. Also, method development for biological drugs is one thing. Digital transformation in healthcare, and overall sort of a rapid development and spreading of new developmental new treatment methods for patients, and also to make research results better accessible to healthcare. So if government says this and this fits us, we should really promote this as well. And if there's one other thing that I would like to maybe suggest is that we know now quite well that it's likely that there will be a precision medicine initiative that the government will push forward in the years to come. And if that is the case, we should make sure that Scilifelab is linked and is known that Scilifelab can help with precision medicine, particularly when combined with biobanks and registries and healthcare and industry. And we should say that all of these wonderful tools that we have available, that they can be applied, and they are actually ideal in many cases for precision medicine initiatives. So one of the things that we in the last couple of years have been trying to say that we would like to develop Scilifelab into a hub for life science in Sweden. And in the infrastructure side, we already are a hub, but we would like to go beyond that. And one thing that we were discussing with the board is how could we help this type of an activity. And this picture that I have for Lars Hammarström, again, don't take it like what are all the little things there. It's just meant to visualize how many interactions we have with academia, with funding bodies, with industry, with biobanks, with healthcare and so forth. So we are already having a hub function. But what is really limiting us quite a bit here is that we don't have any legal ability to make formal contracts between the different players here. And that is one of the challenges that we would like to address in the future. So then finally for my last point, infrastructure. So obviously Scilifelab is all about infrastructure, and we should plan forward in terms of the next 4-year research prop from the government. What are we suggesting to the government as far as research infrastructure support? And this was just being discussed, so I don't have anything particular now to tell you, but in this picture that I put in here is just like an illustration purposes only. Don't read too much into it. But in a sense, we should describe Scilifelab in a simple way, and we should probably emphasize the platforms more than 40 individual facilities to make like bigger units that make sense for driving technologies forward. And something like this needs to be discussed in the next months or years, and maybe we should discuss this with the IAB next spring as well. One thing that I would also like to show here is that We've also played a little bit, and again, this is a draft format only. This is not final numbers and so forth, but we played with statistics on various metrics that we have available from all Scilifelab facilities. So this is a plot of the total funding that the facilities get from Scilifelab, from user fees, from other funding, versus the number of users that the facilities have. So this is like a plot of the whole 40 facilities, and a couple of quick take-home points here is, first of all, that the facilities are all around. So they are all different. They are all having a different funding base. They all have a very distinct and by a couple of orders of magnitude different user base, and a couple of orders of magnitude different funding base as well. So we really need to take that into account when we discuss with the facilities and when we consider their future. It's also that as facilities grow bigger, they have a more diverse funding base, but nevertheless the funding pie of each facility is also very unique. The ones who are here are typically only Scilifelab funded, but the ones that are here have other funding sources. Similarly, we looked at, so one thing I need to put this caveat. Facilities are different from each other. They cannot be directly numerically compared, but I still did it. But we need to take it as a grain of salt that this is not something that we should only be looking at the numbers. This is obviously much more complex. And then this is another way to plot the facilities, almost a linear fraction here between the total funding to the facility and the user fees that the facilities are collecting. So all sorts of statistics like this we have done to compare facilities with each other. With that, I will turn it to Siv, and we'll continue on the data hub strategy aspects.
Okay, so something that we discussed with the board was data strategies, which we thought are very important to think about for the future. And it was me and Johan Rung who brought up these discussions with the board. And we had a number of questions that have come up in discussions with the bioinformatics platforms. So which direction should Scilifelab take in developing bioinformatics, IT and data management for life sciences? Should we engage with other stakeholders, and if so, how? If SNCC does not provide what we need, how should we respond? Should we reduce our rate of production of data, or should we expand the IT infrastructure? And which strategy should we develop or adopt for the balance between central services and facility-driven services for bioinformatics data management? And obviously we did not come to any specific answers, but we wanted to make the board aware that we are thinking about these issues and that we consider that it's very important to continue to discuss them over the next few years. And we had a specific suggestion that the Scilifelab Data Center gets the mandate from the board to represent Scilife in these issues related to data, IT service and IT infrastructure. And I started up the discussions by presenting a few slides that I had got from the bioinformatics platform to illustrate the kind of problems we are facing or emphasize certain points, such as we often say that it's now so cheap to produce data, and we forget that it's become increasingly expensive to analyze the data and store the data, and we need to consider this. I also wanted to emphasize the complexity of the landscape. In addition to Scilifelab, there are other actors, such as the universities. We have to archive the data. We have SNCC, and these actors, we don't have full control over them, so we have to know how to interact with them and if we should interact with them. So we have ourselves, Scilifelab, data processing, internal backups, data delivery, general IT. We have certain needs for IT infrastructure. Then SNCC needs also are doing compute and storage, and we are very much dependent on SNCC. Universities are responsible for data publishing and archiving, and we are also dependent on that. Currently, we don't know exactly how much we need, and we don't know how much these need costs in terms of money. So what we would like to do is to estimate the total need in terms of IT infrastructure that we have here in Scilifelab, to put numbers on these XXX at the bottom. And once we know that, then we would like to go to these other stakeholders and discuss with them, how should we fulfill these needs. So another strategic question is also who should be doing this type of interactions, and we suggested then that the data center could take an important role in discussing and interacting with the other parties such as SNCC and the URFI and others involved. And that brought us to the data center and the role of the data center, and I will now hand over to Johan to say more about this.
All right, thank you. So from the data center, one of the things that we are emphasizing is that it's important for us to maximize the impact of the data that's generated by Scilifelab. Now we've been working for a year and a half roughly and trying to fill this gap and working towards this. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we've done so far. So one of the things we do is that we work primarily towards the facilities, not so much towards individual researchers. And we try to reach the community through the facilities primarily. We've set up order portals. They have been in place since quite some time in various facilities. NGI have it, the microscopy infrastructure have it, National Genomics Project and Cryo-EM, and several others have the order portals that we manage. We set up tools for project management and communication that we make available through us. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. We have started work on data management plans, and this is important for the work with making data fair. We talk about fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. It's something that's very important for us to show that we can do. And we work very closely now with the universities to bring in new support for the facilities. So we try to figure out from the facilities, what are the needs for IT and data management, and how can we find concrete solutions to these things? And this is what we're setting up now is processes to make this concrete, how to do it. We're also building resources. We have a publication database that we have built that's been used for much for the reporting. We have brought in cloud-based storage that we are now piloting for some facilities as a data delivery system, and we hope to make this broadly available and develop services for data delivery and improving. And we've initiated work to build resources for the National Genomics programs. We have some outreach activities. We had an open science workshop. We've been working on the GDP stuff quite a lot. We had a conference on linked data this spring, and we're organizing a workshop on genomics data management for human data this autumn. And we have regularly drop-ins and news going out to the facilities and trying to have that channeled for the facilities. For communication and coordination, we have had this big survey and individual interviews with all the facilities, assessing the needs of IT and data management from the facilities again. We set up a help desk function for data and IT. We have data access services for, in particular, sensitive data that comes out of the genomics platform. And we have a number of collaborations in regard to fair data and coordinate IT activities with the host universities. We also have one where we support operations for a number of issues. One of the main things has been about GDPR this spring. We've supported for Facility Forum, that was last autumn. We are supporting for a reporting procedure, and we also participate in national inquiries and work on research data nationally. So one of these colors are kind of terrible now, but if you can read this, this has facilities up on the left, universities up to the right, researchers down to the left, and that's SNCC. So this slide is a little bit about the discussion at the board meeting about the strategy. And we talked about the balance between how do we provide the IT and data management needs for the facilities primarily, and for researchers, for the Scilifelab community. And we can see this as somewhere between the two extremes. One extreme would be that Scilifelab would basically be a financer, and that you would fund facilities to do all this work all by themselves. And the other extreme would be that everything would be centralized, and Scilifelab centrally would organize and sort of more impose solutions on facilities. Neither of these two are particularly attractive. So we are trying to have this kind of hub model where Scilifelab centrally operates a coordination office to support facilities and researchers in the country in the work to provide the right solutions for IT and data management needs. As Siv said, we have, this is quite a complex scenario. There's a lot of different players involved in this, both at universities, from infrastructures like SNCC, that facilities run themselves, and from commercial providers. And we are trying to get a better picture of the whole overview of what's happening, what the map of IT and data services in the country for life sciences, and find out better what costs are these, what's actually the cost for the life science IT and data needs. So I just wanted to finish with 2 slides about what you can contact us about right now. And this is what we really would like feedback, particularly from facilities. So we do have these order portals, and we are making them available for facilities. Order portals is a tool, a web portal to set up user projects, to interact with the user from facility, and so to handle the forms and to handle the interaction with users. We can provide this to facilities that would need this. It also simplifies reporting. This is something we would encourage more facilities to use. We are working on bringing in a facility management system. This is being procured by KI, and we're involved in this procedure. And we will make sure that what's being procured at KI will enforce this on KI core facilities. And we will make these available on an optional basis to Scilifelab facilities. We have one system called Project Place. It's a project management system. You can deal with team coordination and documentation. This is provided also through Uppsala University, who has bought this. We have a system for team communication called Slack. It's a very lightweight tool for communicating in teams. If you want to use it, talk to us. And we have this system that we brought from Sunet for storage, and it's kind of a cloud-based block object store. And so we have a few things more coming in. We deal with some coordination. Bring in your IT and data management needs to us. There's a number of ways to contact us. So we would like to hear from you and try to find concrete solutions to your needs. And there are a number of ways to talk to us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Get going. So maybe whenever you say that come and talk to us at the data center, you are still not necessarily suggesting that any researcher who has data issues comes to you. So you mostly consider the facilities as your contact point.
Yes, right now I think that's the most efficient way of doing it, because the research community is very large, and I think what we are trying to do is to make have a structure where the data producers help very much in producing the type of data that is going to be easy to use, well annotated, stored in the right places, sort of taken care of in the best possible way from the start. So we think that by working with the data producers primarily, we can sort of foster a very good way of working with data, producing data that's easy for them.
But is it sort of from the user's perspective clear as to who should they talk to? Because in a sense they can talk to the facility, they can talk to the data center, they can talk to entities, they can talk to their own. So how do we help the user community at large on how they should find help and where they should find help? Should we have a better user perspective in that sense?
Yes, I think so. And of course, I mean, this is something that, in the interaction between users and facilities, this is done in so many different things. It's very complex. how users interact with the facilities and with Scilifelab as a whole. So this community building is quite important, I think, and how we provide information properly, both to service providers and to the users.
So I'm wondering if we should have not a research community, but sort of some kind of a technology community on data.
Yes, that's probably
in a similar way. It looked like I was offline for a short while on the other microphone here, but hopefully we can continue now. So anybody any questions on any other topics that we discussed? Or anybody who wants to comment on things that were already said? Can we have online questions so that we don't have a system of online people to... Okay. Well, if there isn't anything, I think we will just close it for this time, and everybody have a great summer, and we'll be back in the fall, one way or the other. Okay, thank you.